Okay, so let's get started. Thanks for joining, everybody. Hopefully you can see my screen. Um, I would like to introduce a couple of my colleagues that will be on there as panelists. They'll be monitoring the Q&A and the chat. I'll be looking at the chat too as best as I can. So we have Marina and Emma from Mobile Coach team that are both on. Just for a matter of housekeeping, this is being recorded, and everyone that has registered for the webinar will be getting a link to the recording after we process it. We just do a little bit of post-production, but hopefully that will go out either later today or tomorrow. And feel free to share the link with colleagues or others that you think would benefit from the material today. So I think those are my only housekeeping items. So let's get started. For those of you that may not know me, welcome. My name is Vince Hahn. I'm the CEO and founder of Mobile Coach. And if we're not connected on LinkedIn already, I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. I post somewhat about chatbots, but mostly I just post about my life experiences and thoughts. And so would love to connect with you. So there's a QR code, or you can just find me as Vince Hahn on LinkedIn. So just to get started, also, if people want to put in the chat where you're from, it'll be great to see where people are tuning in from, and then we'll get started. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how to create a chatbot for really a term to use here is performance support. So for your workforce, this could apply to any other target audience that you might have. So when someone has a question or an issue in the moment of need, can you have a chatbot that's programmed to help them? So it seems like a very easy and wonderful use case, which it is. But as often with any technology implementations, the devil can be in the details a little bit. And so today, I hope to strike the right balance of having everyone see conceptually what this use case is and how it could benefit you in your situation, with enough depth so you can get a sense of what it would take to build. So hopefully I do a good job of that. To get started, I want to show two live examples. And so let me get oriented here. So this first example, I have screenshots here, but I'm actually going to go onto my browser and show you an example. These are both very, very simple examples. So imagine a chatbot like this, where this is a chatbot that is sort of demoing welcoming a new teammate to your company. So like a new hire onboarding user experience. So I come interact with this chatbot, it's welcoming me to the company, and it's giving me very specific options. So it's anticipating what types of things I might need help with. So, it says here, anytime you can text menu to access resources. Here are the menu options. For this demo, I just showed 3 options, but you could have a dozen options if you needed. So if I'm a new hire and I say, oh, I've been in some meetings already in my first few days, and everyone's like using a ton of acronyms. I have no idea what they stand for. And so this could be really helpful. So we have a lot of acronyms. Ask me a common acronym and I'll get you the definition. Because we all come from different industries, I'm just going to use a very generic acronym. So I might say, what does LOL stand for? Just for an easy example. So this is a type of use case where it's the chatbot's designed to anticipate some of the resources I would need as a new hire, and giving me the options available, to me. So very simple example. Let me show you another example. This next example, it's a little bit more functional. So let's say that I'm trying to learn about how the Mobile Coach chatbot platform works. And maybe I'm working on building a chatbot and I've got a question. So in this chatbot, it's saying you can ask me something about Mobile Coach at any time. So there's not a menu here. It's just like, what questions do you have? So I might say, oh, you know what? I'm trying to build a chatbot in WhatsApp. So I wonder if Mobile Coach supports WhatsApp. So I could say, do you support building chatbots on WhatsApp? and so there's an answer. So this is a use case where I'm working away and I've got a question. And so the chatbot acts as like, oh, here's a resource where I can get an answer to my question immediately. So pretty simple use cases, built differently, with different sort of content requirements. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but I wanted to show you those examples. So now, so this next part, I'm going to walk you through the high level questions you have to answer for yourself in terms of how to frame the chatbot you'd want to build to deliver job aids and knowledge on demand for your audience. So before I dive into this, though, I'd like to invite you, if you've got a specific use case in mind, to describe it in the chat. And at the end of this presentation, I'd like to give you I could just react to that and give you some, free consulting about how I would approach your use case. And so you could just very succinctly in a couple sentences write who your audience is, who your target audience is, and what types of content. Because the answer could be very different. If I'm building a chatbot to support salespeople, or if I'm building a chatbot to support nurses, the content, the audience could be very, very different. And so even though the principle is the same of, hey, I want to provide on-demand support for these people, because the content can be very different and their context could be very different, that will drive some of the chatbot design sensibilities that you'd have. So if you could just describe very briefly, here's my use case, here's my audience, here's the type of content that we would need this chatbot to know. Feel free to put that in the chat, and I will try to address those and give you some advice at the end, and we can do a little bit more back and forth too if there's time. Okay, so I'm going to dive into this next section. So the first high-level design consideration you have to ask yourself is, where should the chatbot live? So the two simple examples I made just for this webinar, I just put on a web page because it was easy for me to interact with. But really anywhere where there's messaging, you can put a chatbot. So I've got a couple logos up here like Slack, Microsoft Teams, SMS, WhatsApp. What you have to consider here, there's a couple things you have to consider. Where is it most frictionless for your target audience to interact with this chatbot? So if of course, the chatbot that we're talking about is on-demand support, real-time support. If I all of a sudden have a question and I want to ask a chatbot, but it takes me 15 clicks to get that chatbot, that's going to be introducing more friction than you want. Sort of goes counter to the use case. You want to make it available as quickly as possible. So thinking about where they are. So, if my audience are sales reps that are out knocking doors, and they're not in front of a computer or a laptop all day, something that's going to be mobile friendly is going to be, critical for that audience. If I'm supporting nurses in a hospital where they're not allowed to have mobile phones or a laptop, but maybe there's a workstation or an iPad that's, on the floor of the hospital that they're working on, that's where I'm going to want the chatbot. So somewhere as accessible as possible. The other consideration here that often people will need to navigate around is what your organization will allow from a security perspective. So you could say, oh, for our sales reps, they're texting each other all day, so let's put this chatbot on SMS. But your IT team might say, well, we're not going to allow you to do that because SMS is inherently not encrypted. So that's something that we're not going to allow you to do. So you have to navigate through some of those challenges too to figure out where the chatbot should live. So oftentimes with this question, there's one easy answer, and then there's the realistic answer, and you kind of have to figure out how to navigate to get to those things. So that's the first question, though. Where should the chatbot live? And I should say that it doesn't have to be one answer. It could live in multiple places. You could have the chatbot be available on Microsoft Teams or SMS, but the same logic could be available on a workstation embedded on your CRM or your LMS or some other internal system too. Okay, so the next high-level design consideration is, do you need a rules-based sensibilities? Now, I have written a couple articles this year about rules-based chatbots versus a query or AI-based chatbots. And if you check out my LinkedIn articles, you can see them both there. And I would, hopefully this doesn't sound like self-promoting, but I actually do think that they're pretty helpful. So go check those out. But do you need rules-based sensibility? So let me try to explain this a little bit. I mean, we won't do a raise of hands, but I'm quite confident that all of us, if not most of us on this webinar and those watching the recording, have tried ChatGPT or Bard or Bing or some sort of consumer-facing LLM. And so that use case is, you could say it's on-demand support, because I have a question, I have a need, I want a chatbot to provide some content for me. I can just go right there, ask the question, and boom, it can give me the answer. Okay, that's great. But all of a sudden in an enterprise, there are a bunch of issues. In fact, many of you might be facing some of the issues of how do we harness that type of AI power within the framework of what we're allowed to do in an enterprise. And so oftentimes the answer to that question is introducing rules, or rules-based sensibility. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. You need the chatbot to answer questions that are specific, where the answers are specifically catered to your organization. And in fact, you don't want to be public. So, you need to create some rules to protect that and to guide that. Or you need rules that are logic driven. So that first example is what I would deem pre-approved results. Or you need some logic-driven messages. So here's a great user experience. So remember the little demo I had on for a new hire. You may want a chatbot to proactively engage that new hire. So you might create a rule that says, after 1 week of someone starting in their new role, I want the chatbot to proactively reach out to them and see how they're doing. So, that's obviously something that ChatGPT is not doing. You could make ChatGPT do it, but you have to create your own software to have it do that. And so that's what logic driven is like. Okay, here are some conditions or if-then decision tree type of logic that I want to introduce into the chatbot. So you have to ask yourself, do we need rules-based sensibilities? And my experience is that in almost any enterprise deployment of chatbots, the answer is absolutely yes. And it could be as simple as, we want our chatbot to have its own name. We want to call our chatbot Vinny or something like that. That in a sense is introducing a rule. Okay, so the next question is, do you have a requirement for 100% resolution? So what does this mean? Let's take the ChatGPT example again. ChatGPT will always try to give you an answer. Sometimes the answer is incorrect, or maybe the answer is not quite fulfilling to the user. Now, if you create your own chatbot in your organization and someone asks a question, do you expect 100% resolution? Now, if the answer is no, we're actually going to be happy with it providing an answer most of the time, great. That makes it pretty easy. Then you build a chatbot the best that you can, and you rely on the users to figure out whether, if the chatbot's not giving them the job aid that they need or the knowledge that they need, you leave it up to them to go find the answer. If you have a requirement where, no, we want to make sure every single question is answered, then you need to build in some logic into the chatbot to first figure out if something's not resolved, and then have an escalation rule to say, okay, the chatbot was not able to answer this question. Let's let some human know, create a ticket, or create a notification, sort of, escalate that issue so that everyone that has a question can see that the organization is going to give them an answer. So, if the answer is yes, even though the chatbot's 99% accurate, but for that 1% we want some escalation, that's going to complicate the design of your chatbot, because you have to build in now that workflow, that human intervention workflow. So that's something to consider. That's a high-level consideration. So the last one to talk about here is, how complex is your content management workflow? So there's a couple, I'm going to talk about this one in much more detail because this is sort of the crux of how complex or how easy your project is going to be. So is your content just, a couple dozen FAQs? Okay, that's going to be pretty minimally complex. So you could say so there's a couple questions here. How deep or how big is your content requirement? So if it's just a couple dozen FAQs, I would say that that's a pretty minuscule amount. You might say, oh, well, we have 100 PDFs that represent all our tutorials and all our job aids, and each PDF is 10 pages long. Well, that's still pretty small. 100 times 10 pages is not very much. Or you could say, oh, all our content we could fit in a small library. Then okay, well, now you're starting to get a lot more content. And then you ask, well, how often does the content change? So once you teach the chatbot everything that the content has, is there a workflow that's necessary to keep it up to date? So if things are changing all the time, if you don't have workflow to update the chatbot, then it might, you risk having it give old answers. So these are some design considerations to ask yourself. So we're going to talk a little bit more about content right now. But these are the 4 big high-level design considerations. Where should your chatbot live? Do you need rules-based sensibilities? The answer is probably always yes. Do you have a 100% resolution standard? I would say if a lot of times for phase 1 of your chatbot, you could say, no, let's not have a 100% resolution standard. Let's see how well our chatbot does, and then we can determine whether we need a 100% resolution standard. And then putting your mind around how complex your content requirements are, which again, we're going to talk about in a minute. So let me pause there. And I see some people are putting in their use cases in the chat. Thank you for doing that. If there are any questions in the Q&A or anything that I need to address, no questions either. So if you have a question, feel free to put them in the Q&A or put them in the chat. So I just wanted to pause to see if there's any questions I could answer right now. Okay, let's dive into content, because that's really where the bulk of, I think the bulk of the work that you would need to do. So there are 3 buckets of content configuration options that I want to talk about. The first is preset answers in a single interaction. Okay, so what does that mean? That could be some pretty foreign terms for you. So let me try to explain that and move my Zoom controls over. So where was my... Go back to the... Let me go back to my example here. Okay, so if you remember this example where I've got 3 buttons, so one way to think about preset, the preset answers is creating a decision tree. So a discrete decision tree. So here are our 3 menu items here, or let's just say there's 10 menu items. So actually, let me click on benefits. And then maybe there are sub menu items, which I think I have here in benefits. Yeah, sure. So insurance, PTO policies, FMLA. And so your content might be, oh, everything here is just going to be all pre-planned. That can include, in fact, I might have a screenshot here. Yeah. So that might include your push messaging. So a very common use case on the Mobile Coach platform is training reinforcement chatbots. So chatbots that not only are answering questions on demand, but proactively triggering prompts, proactively triggering learning activities. So reminders, nudges, quizzes, surveys. So it's Thursday afternoon, and the chatbot says, hey, happy Thursday afternoon. Do you have 2 minutes to answer this question? Or remember to do this action item. So all of that can be preset. So that has to be written, right? So a lot of times I tell people who are building chatbots that the #1 variable to a successful chatbot is not the whiz-bang technology, although we think the technology is pretty whiz-bang. Your users actually won't care at all what type of whiz-bang technology you're using to power your chatbot. The #1 variable that determines the success of your chatbot is the writing. So, because that's what people are going to react to immediately. People will to speed read each answer and immediately develop some sort of opinion about how helpful this chatbot is. So, how do you label buttons, or what's the personality of the chatbot? How much is being written by the chatbot? So these are all the preset answer examples. So sometimes, depending on your high level requirements for your chatbot, it could be as simple as writing, some introductory messages, inviting the user to ask their questions, and then uploading 20 FAQs, and you're done. It could be pretty simple. Other times it can be quite a bit of writing. If you've got quizzes, sometimes people want to convert e-learning courses into a chatbot experience, and so there's some work to create that whole decision tree. So that's the first content configuration example, is preset answers in a single interaction. The second is a searchable knowledge base for a mix of rules-based and AI-based responses. So here, we've been doing a lot of consulting and work on our platform with LLMs, which stands for a large language model, or it's what people think of as AI. And what I've found is that people maybe oversimplify their thinking of how an AI works. Like, oh, we've got these 100 PDFs. Let's just train our LLM, and then that's it. The chatbot will know. Will have learned what these what the content in these PDFs. It's actually not how it works. LLMs today need more context than that. So there's a search element. There's some context element in terms of like giving the chatbot a framework to understand the content. And then very commonly in an enterprise, I'm using ChatGPT just because that typically is what people are using. It's just sort of dominated the news. But when I use the word ChatGPT, I'm really using it as an interchangeable term for Bing, or for Bard, or for Llama, or for Mistral, or whatever LLM that you prefer. So the way that ChatGPT was trained was, it was trained on a huge public data set based on public information. And so a simple way to break it down, which I think is useful in this use case, is there's ChatGPT's ability to understand natural language. Then there's ChatGPT's knowledge to go back and to search its knowledge base and provide what it thinks is an answer to a question. And it's really useful to think about those two things independently. And what I have found in most enterprise projects I've been involved with this year is that there's interest in the first and less interest in the second. So what I mean by that is, yes, we want our AI chatbot to be able to understand natural language, but we don't want it to answer questions based on public information. We want it to answer questions based on our enterprise information. That might be consistent with your view as well. So it's useful to think of AI as those two components. And the second content configuration option is just that. We want to use AI to answer natural language, but we want it to search our own knowledge base. So if I go back to the example I was showing you earlier, which is here. So this is an example where this chatbot was trained on features and attributes of Mobile Coach. So I'm going to actually show you. So I think earlier I was able to ask it a question about, does Mobile Coach support, WhatsApp? So let me ask it a different question. What kind of use cases are common on Mobile Coach? It's a little bit, I don't know how it's going to answer. I didn't pre-practice this at all, so we'll see what it says. Okay, so it's given me a bunch of, so now this may not have been the best answer, because maybe ChatGPT could have answered this question directly, although I don't know if it knows about Mobile Coach, so maybe not, probably not. But I don't want ChatGPT. I do want this chatbot to understand my question, but I don't want the chatbot to go to publicly available information and just sort of make up an answer. I want to dictate what the answer is going to be. So this actually is, I'm just speed reading the answer. This is actually a really good answer. And so the way that this was built is that there's a reasonably sized knowledge base that we built, anticipating a bunch of questions that someone might have about Mobile Coach with the answers. And the answers can be short, the answers could be very long. So you can just see this is a basic spreadsheet. And then, so we're dictating the knowledge set, okay? And so then we are using the Mobile Coach platform, we're configuring the query to search an existing knowledge base and provide an answer. And so this will look a little technical, so I'm not going to go into huge detail here. But this is a snapshot of the instructions we're giving an AI engine. So we're saying, hey, we've got everything in this bracket here, sort of a function in Mobile Coach for a knowledge base search. So I've built a knowledge base. So it's searching for, there's a column for title, there's a column for article, which you saw a little bit in that spreadsheet I showed you. This variable here, current user message for GPT, is the user's question that we've captured. So in this case, in the demo I just showed you, like, hey, what are some common use cases for the Mobile Coach platform? And then we're giving a little bit of instruction, like, do not use your knowledge to answer, only use the data that we have provided. So we're providing this, this combination. So that's what I mean by searchable knowledge base. And there's a mix of rules-based and AI-based sensibilities in those responses. And that we have found to be a really nice combination to ensure that the chatbot's performing in the way that you want it to perform. The third content configuration option it's much more technical, so I'm not going to spend time demoing it here. But typically, now this is very specific to the LLM you choose. And so I mentioned Llama and Bard and ChatGPT and Mistral. And so depending on your LLM that you're choosing, it will have a protocol on how you train it with. So instead of a searchable knowledge base, you're actually training it in conjunction with how it was trained already. So you're adding your data set to the data set that it was trained on. So that's a bit more of a technical implementation. And I will say that this is only useful if you have a giant amount of content. So what is a giant amount of content? I would say, the equivalent of thousands of textbooks. So it's very rare, I think, for enterprises to have that much content. But you may, and if you do, then this is a good option for you. If you don't, then number two, where you're creating your own internal knowledge base and using some functions around that knowledge base might be a good solution for you. Okay, so with that said, hopefully people have, let's see, where's my chat? Make sure there's no. Okay, so there's a question from Emma to the hosts and panelists. Emma, if that was meant for everybody, I'm just seeing it so you can ask questions to everybody using everyone if you'd like. But if that's a question for me, I'm happy to answer it. Emma asks me, how familiar are you with LLMs like ChatGPT? Bard?
It was a question for everybody.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you can put your answer in. I'll just copy and paste it in here. How familiar are you with LLMs like ChatGPT and Bard? Okay, so this next part of the webinar, I am going to just give you a quick tour of the platform, of the Mobile Coach platform. So you've seen now all these sort of abstract conceptual ideas that I've presented, but I want to actually show you how this would be built. And hopefully this will be useful to you. And then we'll end by looking at some of the use cases you put in here. So let me get out of here. Okay, so if you remember that first example that I showed you about, the buttons of acronyms, benefits, and job aids, this is where this chatbot was configured. So Mobile Coach is a rules-based engine, rules-based authoring platform. I'm going to do this very quickly. Many of you might be familiar with our platform already, so I'm going to kind of run through this just to sort of turn on some light bulbs in terms of giving you a visual of the conceptual idea of the chatbot functionality you have in your head, and how you'd put that on paper and then translate that into something that can be actually functional. So here in the scripts tab, you can see the first message. So this is where you would author your rules-based messages. Any language that you can type in, you can author in. You can add emojis, you can add images and videos, and there's all sorts of other options as you author scripts. So that's where you do the scripts. The controls give you some options around how you want this particular message to behave. So an example might be, let's say that you ask a question like this one. This is somewhat of a question, like, hey, here's some menu options. How long do you wait before you have the chatbot do something else? So that's like a design question. So here we've got this control, wait until next scheduled rule. So basically this is telling the chatbot, when you ask this question, just wait for an answer until I actually schedule a rule to override it. So there's sensibilities like that you'd have to be aware of as you're designing your workflow. The conditions and actions are where you're going to be putting in the actual logic behind your decision tree. So if someone clicks on the acronyms button, you want it to go to acronyms. The conditions and actions is where you're going to set that logic. And then the calendaring, there are 4 ways to calendar sort of pushed messages. So day of the week, so Tuesday at 4 p.m., day of the month, program day, day 1, day 5, day 10, or a calendar would be October 12th at 2 p.m. And you can actually, so you can create a chatbot where everyone follows the same calendaring, or you can have it be dynamic. You could create fields, custom fields where the chatbot asks, hey, what would be a good date and time, or day or time for me to follow up with you? And if someone says Wednesdays at 2 p.m., you can capture that and then calendar based on their preferences. So this script tab here is by and large meant for creating messages that are pushed out or creating rules that do stuff. So you can see here, this particular row number 4, doesn't have any script because it's actually just doing stuff. So that's why we often call Mobile Coach a rules engine. Okay, so that's the script piece. Now, if you do want to train your chatbot on knowledge base, then I want to show you actually the second chatbot here that I was demoing, what kind of use cases. This is like LLM based. So let me see if I thought I logged into it before here. Yep. So here you can see there's a couple places where you can program your knowledge base. In this particular demo, I used our local tables feature, so you can see all the different FAQs there. You can actually upload a knowledge base as well. So this is building a knowledge base and importing that into our system. So you've got, you've got your own database of content within either a knowledge base or a local table. So in these cases, this is where you would do a search for content and then use that in conjunction with an LLM. Okay, so then the next component is how you then integrate with an LLM. So in this case, I have an API connection with OpenAI. And again, it doesn't have to be OpenAI. Any LLM that you can integrate through APIs, you can use. So I've got sort of this handshake with OpenAI. And then in my rules, I've actually teed up querying. So let me just sort of describe it this way, where I've got some rules that are saving the user's query, searching the knowledge base, packaging that up for ChatGPT in this case to understand, and then when ChatGPT responds, I'm saving that response as well. So let me just show you what that looks like here. I got a pretty picture I want to show you. So this is, in a sense, these 4 rules here are doing what what this picture shows. So you have the chatbot. When the user does a query, we're actually intercepting the query, saving it, running it through some rules, sending those rules with instructions to the LLM. We've already uploaded our knowledge base. We're intercepting the LLM's response so we can save it. We can actually review it and send it back if we don't like it before you show it to the user, actually. But in this case, then we're in the case of the demo, we just pass it back through. But now you can go into the reporting and see everything that the chatbot's done. Do you remember I talked a little bit about human intervention? So we actually have a full notifications layer. If I let me go into a random rule here, and if I go to my actions list, I can create a rule where I'm sending an email to a user right there. And essentially what that's doing is creating a notification. So you could say, if the chatbot fails to answer the question, then send a notification to this user. And we have actually our own inbox system, which is like a contact center system where you can come in and actually see all your users and interact with them through an inbox. And so that's all part of our platform. And then, reporting's really a critical piece of the mobile coach experience. So let me show you that real quick. Okay. It's logging in as a. So here's a view of a reporting where I can come in and see all my statistics. I can dig into a specific chatbot. And then in a specific chatbot, I've got all these reports I can review. And so basically we're capturing, all the interactions and the metadata around it. How often are people responding to questions? How long does it take them to respond to questions? There's a bunch of A/B testing you can do with our platform. So let's say that you send a push reminder to your audience and half get it worded in one way and half get it worded in a different way. You can use our reporting to measure which one does better. So there's a bunch of those types of reports that you can create using our platform. So there's just, show you here, there's, I think, 10 different report templates you can use to slice and dice your data. Okay, maybe the last thing I wanted to show is we actually have a script library. So if you have an idea for like a training reinforcement use case or a sales training or onboarding or an HR, we already have a bunch of chatbots already built for these things. So I can go to onboarding and look at, here's a new employee onboarding daily script, a 4-week chatbot to support onboarding of new employees. I can click on it, kind of read it, say, hey, yeah, this is like 80% of what we need. It's already built. So you come in here to the script library, you can import it into your mobile coach instance and just make the edits. And then you could be live actually pretty quickly on the chatbot on the platform. The last thing to show you is all the different channels that we support. So phone numbers is SMS, Microsoft Teams, Facebook, Google, Line, Rocket Chat, a little bit more obscure, but we do support it. Signal, Slack, Telegram. There's actually a couple ways we integrate with Telegram. Viber. Web chat is like a web widget. And so that's like the examples I was showing you. And web widgets can pop up in the corner. They can totally be customized in terms of color and fonts and all of that. WebEx, WhatsApp, and Zoom. If organizations have a messaging platform that they want to support that is not on here, it is possible for us to integrate with a messaging platform if they have, they allow it. So of course we only work within legal terms and conditions, but yeah, happy to add to this list as well. Okay, so that's sort of my show and tell. Now, thank you for those of you that joined. I'm going to go back to the chat and react to some people's use cases. I see just a few use cases on here, but if you have other questions based on anything I've talked about today, please put them in the chat, and make sure that you mark it to everybody. And there's also a Q&A. Great. Is Mobile Coach available in French, both for the end user and the staff? So a chatbot in our platform can be integrated into multiple languages. In fact, let me go back to my other user here. Just show you. Oops. In here. I just wanted to show you this feature so I can come in here and you can see that we have this option in the settings called Enable Multi-Language. This gives you the ability to create different localized versions of your chatbot. So we have chatbots in Japanese and Korean and all Spanish and lots of different languages right now. I just want to, so the short answer is yes, but I want to give a little bit of a longer answer. There's rules-based messages, and those need to be localized and translated and localized in our platform. And there's AI-generated responses. And so for the rules-based, we support any language that you can type in. For the AI responses, you're limited to the languages that LLM supports. And so I think ChatGPT, I could be wrong, is up to like 40 languages or something. So as long as your language is supported by your LLM, then we can create prompts to say, hey, please answer in French, and it will do a nice job of that. The platform, so the authoring platform and all its documentation currently is only in English. So whoever's building the chatbot would have to have a functional knowledge of English to operate the platform, but you can create your chatbot completely in the language that you have. Thanks for your question. Okay, so let's see. Paul says, providing learning reminders through a 6-month leadership development program. So it's a great use case. So in that particular use case, you would have a rules-based sensibility where you're creating a 6-month timeline of the curriculum that you want to sort of reinforce. And you could have that rules-based sensibility be quite complex. Let's say that leadership development program centers around 6 different competencies. You could have the chatbot ask, hey, Vince, out of these 6 competencies, which one do you want to work on this month? And so what I might be working on this month might be different from what Emma's working on. That's still rules-based. But I would also encourage you to use an AI-based prompts in there. So particularly for leadership programs where practice and getting feedback are a really important part of skills development. So you can have the chatbot use AI to say, hey, let's practice active listening skills right now, or let's practice exhibiting empathy. And you can have the chatbot have this coaching interaction with your users. So you both have the rules-based sensibility as well as the AI-based use case. That's a really great one. Matal says, I'd like to be able to support students in the LMS in higher education. Questions could range from what's due next to which class should I register for next semester. Nudges coming from the chatbot could also be useful. So that's great. So that's also a great example of a combination of rules-based, so you're having nudges, and also having AI. Now, that's a great example, though, of not relying on publicly available information to answer questions. So if a student in a class in your school says, what's due next? I mean, imagine asking that question to ChatGPT. It would have no idea what you're talking about. So there would be some work to do to program your chatbot with the answers for your students. But then it would be very powerful because it would be able to answer the students right away. That also brings up one other design element, is that there are instances where people in your target audience group will prefer to ask a question to a chatbot than to a human being. So the example in your use case of what's due next, that for some students, they might feel safer. They might have this internal dialogue that says, I should know this. So I'm not going to ask my professor or my TA because they're going to judge me. So instead, I'm just going to ask the chatbot. That's a great example of where a chatbot can be a preferable channel to answer questions than a human being. Marty says, I would like to support the launch of a new app which allows salespeople to see customer survey feedback. Interesting. So example questions would be, how do I export feedback data, or how can I respond to negative customer feedback from within the app? So yeah, so you've got, so this is sort of a little bit of technical training, where you've got a system of here are the 4 steps to make an export. So if someone forgets how to do that, they can ask the chatbot, and the chatbot can actually send a link to a screencast or to images, step 1, step 2, step 3 of the screenshots. So it doesn't have to be all text. So that could be a nice use case. But I'll also say that it could also be programmed then to provide some real coaching. So, hey, your last 5 calls, the feedback was lower than normal. Here are 3 suggestions for you to improve. So that's just me brainstorming, but that could be a nice addition to your idea. Let's see. Mitch says, support technicians in the field who need to troubleshoot from a range of manufacturers' manuals to service equipment. Great use case where you've got probably not a million pages, but maybe hundreds of pages of manufacturer manuals. And I imagine those manuals include images with maybe legends of, with terms and arrows and things like that. So a little bit of work would have to be required to make sense of that. So the chatbot will be able to make sense of that. And so I say a little bit, there's work involved. And so to generalize that work, it would be coming up with what are the top 50, top 20, 30, 50 questions that a technician might have. So coming up with that list, and then creating the answers from those manuals. So you can either create a spreadsheet or a knowledge base where you've got the question and the page, sort of the pages and the content and the manuals that answer the question. You can get a little bit more fancy too by including images and providing a little bit more metadata for it. So there's a little bit of work to do that. But once it's all done, then the chatbot would work very well, I think. I would also say that for you, you'll want to answer the question back on the slide of how often do those manuals change. So if they come out every quarter, or if there's a change or addendums that get sent out, you'll have to add into your workflow updating the chatbot so that it's not providing outdated information. Okay. So let's see. Grace asks, will all confidential content be protected under the rules-based sensibility? Actually, there are ways to protect confidential data in both rules-based and AI-based. Most of the major LLMs have released secure ways to house and protect your content, but certainly under the rules-based, it's much more ensured that your content's going to be protected. Especially under the mobile coach platform, where we're a highly secure platform. And then in your instances where you're authoring your chatbot, no one else has access to that content. So, and that goes to all the back and forth conversation between the chatbot and your users is all kept confidential and protected. Okay, and any other questions from people? Great questions, great use cases. I think all of those are wonderful use cases for a chatbot. So I'd encourage you to pursue them. If you think that we could help you, please reach out. Happy to talk about what it would take to build your chatbot using the Mobile Coach platform. My email address is vince@mobilecoach.com. I'm sharing my screen again just so you can see my email address, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. So thank you all for joining. I hope you got something out of this. You'll all get a link to the recording. This is really exciting stuff. And I truly, of course, I'm a little biased, but I think building chatbots like this could really positively affect company performance. And so I really encourage you to take a look at it and start working towards getting chatbots widely accepted within your organization. So thanks, everybody. Hope you all have a wonderful day. We're signing off now.